This is Tim.
And Mulele.
And this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim with Mulele in Tokyo. We were just talking about how the schedule has been all kind of messed up today because I had a Skype student and had Mulele scheduled, and then both of them were like, "Oh yeah." Well, the first one, the student was like, "Oh, I thought we had canceled today," and so that got pushed later, and then Mulele and I had to push later, and so. They were kind of leapfrogging over each other, but here we are. Everything's getting done anyway, so that's good. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. I mean, I'm working super hard and super fast on lots of illustration, but that's part of why I forgot that we were doing podcasts today. Sorry about that. But yeah, pretty good. So, shall we just jump in?
Okay, yes. We'll jump in like squirrels here, because it's a comic about squirrels.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is called Squarriors. Yeah, let that sink in. I mean, it looks like it should be a humor comic, but it isn't. I mean, I guess that's just the association we have with small animals, that they're cute, and if there's a comic about them, it's going to be a humor comic.
Well, also the title Squarriors,
yeah,
it's like a pun.
Yeah, it doesn't really fit the tone of the comic.
Yeah. What was that animated film about rabbits from the 70s?
Oh, yikes. Animated?
Watership Down.
Oh, I guess I've heard of that. I'm not terribly familiar with it.
That story was kind of brutal from what I remember. I remember seeing it as a little kid and just going, my God, that's so dark. But Watership Down has the right name for the tone of that story. This one doesn't quite. And I don't know, Squarriors is really, really playful in its title, but that's not the story you get inside. Really surprised.
Yeah. So this is a comic that we were sent by by a publicist this is from First Comics, which was around in the 80s and died and was revived just a few years ago.
Why were they revived?
Well, I think it's just a different company that wanted to use a somewhat recognizable name.
Oh, okay.
Although actually I noticed that looking at the site that the old First comic Badger is being published again by the new First Comics. And actually, I guess they started up in 2011, and then a couple years ago, Devil's Due bought them, or they kind of merged. So now it's like Devil's Due / First.
Okay.
And so what this is like it's the first 4 issues as a trade paperback. And I just started reading the comic without really looking at the site first. And so actually the site kind of answered a question that I had once I'd read like half the comic. But so each issue begins with some humans in 1985 or 6. Because I think the first one was 86, and after that they were 85. But it's just like one scene of something happening. The first one's pretty brutal. It's these guys, I think, in a bar, and the one guy gets his hand nailed to the bar, and then he gets shot in the head. The subsequent ones are not that brutal, and they all seem to be centered around this one family and the father is in the military, and apparently there's like a war going on in California. So this is like an alternate past. And then it jumps ahead to 1995, and all the characters are small animals. Although there's one scene, I think in the first issue, where one of the rodents found a bunch of hidden humans who, I'm not sure if they were alive or dead. They were quite thin. You could see their ribs. And they're referred to as creators. So, well, then finally, I kept reading mainly because I wanted to find out what the connection was between those 80s human scenes and the 90s animal scenes. Well, on the website, and actually, I realized in the email that I had not read terribly thoroughly. It says it's an epic saga of warring animals who inexplicably become intelligent after the dying off of the human race. Now, so I guess that those human scenes are sort of leading up to showing us why the humans died off. But other than that, I'm not sure how connected that is to what's going on with the animals. It's a lot of like, the animals have divided into tribes, and they're kind of like cooperating with each other or fighting each other, and they have spears and clubs, and some of them have bows and arrows, yeah, it's basically like that. And a lot of like people, or not people, animals, who were allied with other animals, then turning on them, traitors and that kind of situation. But I don't know. I guess I besides the sort of connection between the 80s humans and the 90s animals, I had a little trouble figuring out why I should care what was going on.
Exactly.
I didn't feel an appreciation of like, what are the stakes here? What's the goal? It just seemed to be kind of meandering.
Yeah, actually, that's really what I thought. There seems to be no real point that's set up in the beginning of the comic or explored in the middle of the comic, which is about as far as I got. I got to about page 70 or 80, and then I was like, I'm kind of done.
Yeah, I'm on 94, and it's like, whatever.
Yeah, and that's a real shame, because the artwork is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
And the layouts are pretty good. I had some problems with the placement of word balloons.
Yes.
Oftentimes ignore the artwork, and overlay onto things that would, or elements of the artwork that would give the picture overall cohesion or focus.
Okay, well, there's that too, but also sometimes it was unclear what order to read the balloons in.
Yeah, I had that a couple of times. But the idea to make it white on transparent gray, or the word balloons, is kind of weird. I didn't quite see the point of that. Maybe it's just a design choice. It's not difficult to read, but at the same time, it's kind of like, well, why? Why would you make it semi-clear, and then obscure the artwork by placing it badly? It's just real weird. But
by the way, I didn't give credits here. It's written by Ash, maybe Maczko, and the art is by Ashley Witter.
Yeah, to be honest, I've not heard of either of them.
Me neither, but
sorry, but the artwork is amazing.
Mm-hmm. It's really a hyper realistic style of animals, or like some of them are kind of humanish animals, a little kind of bulked up squirrels and stuff, but it looks really realistic.
Yeah. Now, about the story, the why does it take place in the 80s and 90s? And
Yeah, it seems kind of random.
yeah, and inexplicable. I'm sorry, my English is failing me. It means cannot be explained,
Yeah.
but this is a fiction.
Well, yeah. So I mean, if it's really inexplicable, that's sort of like giving up on you, or like just kind of making an excuse for your own story. I can't explain it. They just started talking.
Yeah, just fucking tell us. And that's the thing. I mean, I see that there's for lack of a better word, a fuck ton of talent going into this project, but there seem to be some basic elements here that are, or not mistakes, but just poor choices. And one of them would be to say inexplicable. Maybe it's something that the writer is just like, hey, I'm going to go this way because why not?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that human storyline is going to eventually explain why they became intelligent.
I don't know. I see no reason why the writer would want to. Maybe he thinks he's doing The Walking Dead, where we don't know why the zombies came back to life. They just do. But this is not satisfactory, and it's an itch I can't quite scratch in this story. Which that and the lack of motivation or momentum in the story, and also the characters being very, very similar and very, very many.
Yeah, that was another problem. Which squirrel is this that's talking now?
Yeah, the one with the green cowl or the one with the red cowl, man, I really felt, yeah, you've got a community here, but it's not well defined, and the names aren't really helping me either. The design of them isn't really working. It's just too much all of a sudden with no explanation, which leaves me a little bit puzzled.
Yeah, you just kind of you parachuted in, and with no guide to. Oh, this cat just stabbed a mouse with a spear.
Yeah, so this is Squarriors Spring.
Yeah,
but this is the first story of this series.
Yeah,
this is the introduction.
Right.
Yeah, so as an introduction, it missed a lot of marks here. It can be whatever it wants to be, but it cannot be confusing, which is what a lot of this is. And it feels like the writer has been mulling this story over in his head for years, and maybe even talking it over with friends for years. Those friends maybe have the ability to ask questions and get a sense of what's going on. And why they should care. But for the reader who's kind of detached from it, there's a little too much inside baseball here. So, and just a curious point, as my mind began to wander, and looking at the absolutely gorgeous colors, especially in some of the dream sequences, I kind of realized that actually rodents are mostly colorblind.
Yeah, I imagine they are. So they can't appreciate the color, the great color in this.
Those vivid colors in the dream sequences are a little bit, but then again, so is a talking rodent. So what am I saying? But anyway, yeah, I want to look at it more, but I do not want to read it. And Volume 1 has so much to it that is there but not there. It's there, but it's kind of obtuse. Volume 2 needs to work extra hard to clarify some of this stuff, because if it just kind of picks up the thread and continues along the same path, then you've got 2 volumes with the same problem. So as far as Volume 1 goes, it's a feast for the eyes, but it's kind of hard to work through.
Yeah, and it felt very slow. I was like, come on, something, please happen. I mean, there are some battles and stuff, but again, I don't know why I should care. I mean, give us some kind of strong thread here so we know kind of what we should be expecting or what the animals want to have happen or well, and I think, the main thing hanging over it is why did this situation happen? And apparently the dying out of the human race is going to be spread out over a lot of issues, and why the animals are intelligent is inexplicable. So I guess I'd like to get that kind of explained sooner.
Yeah.
And then tell us where we're going from here, and not just like a lot of tribal warfare with no kind of clear goal.
Yeah. I mean, the battle stuff is really, really intense and really graphic, whether it's animal violence or human violence. I can kind of see where they split it up into different episodes. So if this is like a 24 or 30 page comic, I can kind of see where it looks kind of it's easier to digest because what we're reading is the trade paperback version
of those four issues.
Yeah, and it's kind of intense to take all at once. But still, there are a lot of questions here as to what's going on and why this is important.
Yeah. By the way, just a kind of small thing that I found a little disorienting. There's a character named O-H.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking someone was saying O or O. But no, it's a character's name, and it was kind of jarring every time I got there because I would misunderstand it every time. So don't call your character O.
Yeah. Also, Mio is a little bit weird. I don't know. I was wondering if he was supposed to be the one. But so far in the story, he hasn't become the one.
To break them out of the mouse matrix? Or...
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, I would say overall, the writer needs to focus a little bit more closely on the characters and the whys. It's kind of set up like a Game of Thrones type thing. There's lots of violence, which reminds me of Game of Thrones. There's lots of micro movements of many characters that have to be followed to kind of understand what the eventual story is. But yeah, it's just lacking some compelling element to in the characters and in the story. Yeah. But man, that artwork is gorgeous.
Yeah, if you just want to appreciate the artwork, that's a reason to pick it up. But
yeah.
So we heard from Kristen Tipping, who made the Evil Witch Alley comic that we talked about a few episodes back. And she posted 2 comments on the blog post. In the first one, she was just wanting to clear up a couple of things that we sort of wondered about in the episode. So we had talked about her being on Webtoon and on Tapas or Tapastic, whatever they're calling it now. She said she's posting on both of them, just on different schedules.
Oh, okay.
And she mentioned she has a Patreon page, patreon.com/Kristen Tipping. And on that page, the comics go up there first, and then a week later they come out in other venues.
Well, as you do.
And she says also it may not have been out when you recorded, but there is a book available now. the full first arc is out as an 84-page book called Evil Witch Alley and the Black Hole. It's available on Amazon and CreateSpace, and there's a PDF download of the book available on my Gumroad store as well. And then in her second comment, after she'd finished listening to the episode, she said, "I'm glad to hear that you were both so positive about the story. I kind of get what Tim was saying about the transition to the neighbor's house being awkward. I was trying to keep the story moving as much as possible, and some parts may have seemed a bit forced as a result. As to why there's an evil in Evil Witch Alley, there's a very spoilery reason, and a less spoilery reason. The less spoilery one is that sometimes Allie is actually just kind of an evil little shit. There's an asterisk where the I should be. This will become progressively more apparent as the story goes on. She throws tantrums and overreacts to things, and she can be selfish, thoughtless towards others sometimes, just like any child. The thing is, most children don't have reality-breaking magic powers. When a normal kid throws a tantrum, they might throw a toy at you. Allie, on the other hand, might turn you into a deer, which is considerably worse, especially if it happens to be hunting season. You could argue that this still doesn't make her evil because she usually doesn't fully understand the consequences of her actions in these situations. However, I thought it would still be wise to warn the audience straight off that she's not the total sweetheart they might assume at first. So there's some explanation of the comic.
Okay, but I must comment here and say no. We have the first story, the first arc. We've read the first arc, and it was very entertaining, and I liked it quite a bit. But if there is going to be evil in this child, she needs to express that somewhere in the first arc. Otherwise, you do have the question that we posed. And to have a little peek at the evil that may be coming up in a big spoilery way later is I think, fair and actually quite good to have in the story. When it comes up, it doesn't come out of nowhere in the future. And when we see a little bit of the evil come forward, you could even have just mischievous and we still accept evil. But she's actually quite together and reasonable in that story. And in fact, she does a lot of good. So the evil title is absolutely not earned in the first arc. And so for that, I say no.
Yeah, she did seem the opposite of evil in a lot of that.
Yeah, and now I understand that with a webcomic, whereas you have a story and a core concept for the character, they may not mesh perfectly the first time around. Usually the second or third story arc, you're like, okay, this is where it's going to come, the punch that makes the whole point gel. It's just and I understand that could be what's happening here. And I'm not saying that you have to go back and change anything. I'm just saying that for the next time, it might be better to just work in a little bit of something there, so we know where the evil that we may know that the evil is coming, even if it is not here yet.
Some kind of hint.
Yeah, and that's basically it. But I still loved the comic. I still thought it was charming. So yeah.
So what's going on with your comic stuff?
Well, this podcast is going to be out a little bit after the event, but I'm going to a Comic-Con in a week, a little less than a week. That would be May 6th.
Okay.
So sorry, way late.
Yeah, Comitia.
But for that, I've got a new comic, Yakai #2, or what is the English title, man? I always forget. Night Mystery.
Night Mystery, okay.
Yeah, Night Mystery #2, another true ghost story from my past. beyond that, I'm just working on MindGator, getting that done. I did update on the Kickstarter saying that it would be finished around May, the end of May. Looks like it'll be a little bit more towards the beginning of June, but still, I'm pretty close. But beyond that, that's all I'm doing.
Okay.
Nothing else.
Yeah, I should mention, as I always do in Deconstructing Comics, that we have a Patreon page, patreon.com/deconcomics. So I know that there are people listening to these critiques, and I've gotten a few, little comments on Facebook or whatever that they like listening to the critiques. So if you feel like it's worthwhile, please pledge a little bit.
Yeah, and drop a couple of bucks, man. Although it's reoccurring, right?
Right, yeah, it's a monthly donation.
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't have to be like a giant long time commitment either. It can be, drop in for a couple of months, drop out, and then come back when you have a little more cash.
Yeah.
But the fact that you've been doing Deconstructing Comics for, 11 years, 12 years now?
Yeah, 11 years last December, so like 11 and a half at this point.
Yeah, man, that's some value there.
Yeah. Okay. And of course, we're on Twitter at Decon Comics, and your social media?
I'm at Mulele Redux, Redux, Mulele for people who don't know how to spell Mulele. On Twitter, on Facebook. I think there are a couple of versions of me on Facebook. Sorry. Just look for the one with the post that was maybe this month or this year. And that's me currently.
Okay.
Also, Mulele.com, although I don't update as much as I'd like to, I'm looking at revamping the site soon, so there should be more on that soon.
Okay. And of course, our site is deconstructingcomics.com, and all the podcasts are there with show notes and at least one picture, sometimes more pictures, if there are things to put pictures of up. So anyway, and if you'd like us to critique your comic, send a PDF or a link to mail@deconstructingcomics.com, and we'll read at least 30 pages, and we'll talk about it here. So, till next time, this is Tim.
And Mulele.
And thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics.